When installing your rafters, it is vital to have the correct on-center measurements. You're going to use the mark that you made in the last step on the center of your beam, and if your pergola has an odd number of rafters in the roof, this is the dead center of that first inside rafter location. If your finished pergola is going to have an even number of rafters in the roof, it's going to be the center point for the first two inside rafters that you'll install, meaning that it is 11 7/8 on center in each direction for your two inside rafters. Those two inside rafters would be 23 3/4 on center from one another when installed. Now for your two outer rafters, it's going to be 22 3/4 on center from the inside rafters. That's a full inch shorter on center versus all of those other ones. If you have a unique space and you need to trim your outer panels, go ahead and put your outside rafters wherever you need to, as long as it's 22 3/4 on center or shorter, and we'll trim the polycarbonate roofing pieces later to accommodate this. Now you're ready to cut your rafters to length. Please consult your layout worksheet measurement F for that measurement, and if you'd like to see the rafter cutting in more detail, reference our cutting materials video in this same playlist. At this point, before we make any more alterations to the rafter, we typically throw one up on the finished beams of the pergola roof. This is going to indicate the final slope once we put the polycarbonate pieces on when we're all done. If you'd like a slope a little bit steeper or a little less steep when you're all done, this is going to be your very last chance to make any alterations to those beam heights. If you're good with your rafter slope, the only other thing to consider is how much overhang you're going to have past that outside beam. We typically recommend 24 inches, and that's what we do as a standard. It just has a good aesthetic look and feel to it. But if you need to go a little bit shorter because your space is unique or has an obstruction, by all means, shorten it up. When you're happy with your rafter overhang, go ahead and write that measurement down. This can be double checked by climbing up your ladder and measuring from the outside of the rafter to the outside of the beam. A little pro tip here as well, this is a good spot to take your dull pencil and mark where that rafter is going to sit on your beam. So our guys typically make two little marks on the side of the rafter, one on the inside of that beam, one on the outside of that beam, and that'll help you set it up in the same exact place to ensure your same overhang. The last marks we're going to make on this rafter are going to dictate where the rafter installs into the beam. So these are going to be made on the very top of the rafters. The first mark is 1 inch further in from whatever our desired overhang is, and the second one is 7 inches further in from our desired overhang. So our install guide says if your rafter overhang desired was 24 inches, you'd make a mark 25 inches and 32 inches in on that rafter. Now that we're done marking up our rafter, we can double check these measurements by taking the piece up on top of the roof and laying it down on the beam. Ensure that our marks on the side of the rafter line up to the beam, our mark on top of the rafter lines up with the center of the beam where it'll attach into it, and that our rafter overhang is correct as well. After confirming all of these marks line up, go ahead and measure and mark out all of your additional rafters. Now you're ready to drill, but before you do so, please double check that your aluminum insert is centered on the inside of the vinyl. Your drilling here is going to utilize a vary bit. You're going to go straight through the vinyl, straight through the aluminum on the top of that rafter. No one is ever going to see this hole again, and it's going to sit right under the polycarbonate roofing. So it can be as big or small as need be. Just make sure that it's got enough wiggle room to get your drill extension in there when you go to attach the bottom of your rafter to the top of that existing beam. We highly recommend installing your outside rafters first. So get that first one up there, and using an extension in the screws labeled rafter to beam, go ahead and fasten that one down. Now when setting the other outside rafter into place, it's extremely important at this point that the measurements are exact. Go ahead back and forth and check out your layout worksheet and ensure that everything matches up with measurement A just as it's supposed to. When you get the other outside rafter fastened down, we can now move on to the inside rafters. I just want to reiterate at this point that the center to center from the outside rafter to the first inside rafter is 22 3/4 on center if you didn't need to alter anything or change any of your width. So if you're using the pieces as is and we sent them, 22 3/4. Now when we move on to the inside rafters, the center to center of every inside rafter to the next inside rafter is 23 3/4. This is paramount to your polycarbonate panels fitting in correctly and your roof being rainproof when you're all done. Our crews like to use a string line on the two outermost rafters to ensure consistency amongst rafter overhangs past that outside beam. They typically use a clamp, stretch out that string line, and they slide the rafters up. Don't touch the string, but get it as close as you can without touching. We recommend going slow here, installing one rafter at a time and double and triple checking those on-center measurements before you move on to the next one. This is the last time we can reiterate, these are the measurements that need to be precise on your pergola roof to ensure everything is rainproof. Once your rafters are all installed, you can finish with your lower beam. If you have an attached unit, there's only going to be one lower beam. A freestanding unit, you're going to have two lower beams to install. This can be done by bumping it up against the bottom of the rafters, ensuring the overhang is consistent with your higher beam that's already been installed. And you're going to use the same method, going in through the top of the rafter with an extension, going into the top of that beam to lock it into place. All of your rafters and all of your beams are now installed.